All right, so I've got it recorded, so don't say anything that is going to incriminate you. Here we go. There's Samson and Shannon, live from Oklahoma. Now, I've known David for a while. I started working with his church about 4 years ago. They're down north of Tampa, Florida. And they say that they're a United Methodist church, but they don't act like a United Methodist church at all.
Not
So,
really, no.
so David, how are things?
Man, things are going well, Alan. We are just getting through our fall launch.
Yeah.
So we did a series campaign, a curriculum that we wrote called Tyrants: Overcoming the Obstacles Holding You Down. And
Oh,
so
cool.
we've been launching groups the last couple of weekends, and the first message is this weekend to go along with those groups.
Very good. So you guys, we started that way back,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so we coach them. They develop their own curriculum. They've got a great team there, and and we coached them on how to do it. And here they are, 4 years later, still doing it. So you guys are actually you're about the same size, both of your churches. David's might be a little bit bigger, but you're running about the same. You both put 76 to 100 for your groups, so you're both running about the same number of groups. So that's very cool. So we'll see if these other guys pop on. It'll give us a little more variety as far as size, larger and smaller. But we can talk about what we want to talk about. So I had this whole thing mapped out, and I had everybody's questions grouped according to what they wanted to talk about. But I have preference for talking with you guys about what it is that you want to talk about. And if the other ones show up, then we'll answer the questions. If not, we'll just say, tough luck. Okay, so what I'm seeing here, and you have some things that are similar in that, neither one of you or your churches are new at groups. You've been doing it for a while. And so having worked with David's church, they've done a lot with campaigns and creating a curriculum that aligns with the weekend service, kind of like 40 Days of Purpose way back when. And then what you guys were saying, Samson and Shannon, is that your church has done more of the free market system where you're recruiting leaders, and then people are signing up to be in groups for what, like 12 weeks?
Yes, that's about our semester. Yeah, 12 weeks.
Okay, and then you do what I affectionately refer to as fruit basket upset, and you change everybody around, and they all get to choose a different group to be a part of, except they don't, because a lot of them, they have relationship. They just go together from group to group, right?
Yeah. So we don't break any groups apart. We let them stay in
Good.
their group.
Because some of them do, and I'm like, you're just fighting the inevitable. People want to stay together. I mean, I know there's models where you raise up an apprentice and you break up the groups and you start new groups and all of that. And my opinion is that works really well in Korea, but not so much here. And
Yeah.
and Carl George is a dear friend of mine and a mentor. He may not be after today, but anyway, I see somebody else's. A couple of other somebodies are coming on late. So anyway, we'll start with what you guys want to talk about, and then we'll go from there. So kind of, I'm looking at all of your lists. I know David, you guys have had a good run. Now that you're talking about the last year and a half of growth.
Yeah, because we did, you guys started with us 4 years ago, and we had just incredible success with our
Mhm.
groups. And then they kind of got away from it for about a year and a half. And then when I came on as groups pastor a year and a half ago, we tackled it again. And we're doing great. We haven't hit the same amount of success that we had with that initial run when you guys were walking us like hand in hand, so to speak. So yeah, now we've done this a number of times. Everyone's pretty used to it. We're kind of getting past that initial phase of I'd say this time we probably have just as many existing groups and what we call friends and family groups, which is
Hmm.
you just grab someone and go do a group. We probably have more of those than brand new groups with new leaders. So we're kind of like, what's the next phase for us? What are the next things for us to be looking at in our
Yeah,
ministry?
and that's one of those things that I found with groups. Of course, I know David's church pretty well because I kind of walked alongside of them for a year. And because I think when we first started, you guys had about 600 in groups, and after the first launch, it went to 1,000.
Yeah.
and then the second launch it went to like 1,600,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and then the third one it topped like 2,000. At least this is what I wrote in your case study, so please just validate this, okay? You weren't there, you don't know.
Right. You know better than me, so yes.
You have
we'll
to go
with
look up Lynn, but no, and that was a great run of kind of one building on the other. But then it's like I think what happened is in that 12 months by putting everybody through their paces, we kind of wore everybody out.
Yeah.
I mean, the staff, the congregation, I mean, they were toast. And so then the thought was, well, let's back off a little bit. Well, I mean, the truth of anything is if you back off a little bit, then things start to slow down. And then in comes David on his white horse and his white hat, and he leads them back to where they need to be, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that, except maybe not with the horse or the hat.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so you guys are both at a place where, I mean, you could both, and I know some other people have joined us on the call. And so Doris, you're there? Shy. And I see a Heather. Heather, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Heather right here.
And Heather, you are in Manteca, huh?
Yes, I am. Yep. Where I'm at Crossroads Grace in Manteca.
Yeah. Well, I used to, for 15 years, was at a little church down the road called New Life Christian Center in Turlock.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
So
yeah, we have. Do you know Jim Hanna? He's there now.
Yes, I know Jim. I've known Jim
Okay.
for quite a few
Great.
years. So,
Great.
so does this mean you work for Ed Applegate?
I do. I do work for Ed. Ed moved into an executive pastor role
Oh.
about just over a year ago, and then
Well,
hired me as the director.
So Heather, I'm going to put you on my prayer list. So
Oh, thank you. I need that.
I've known Ed for a long time. All right. So, and you're fairly new in your role. So it's interesting because all of our churches are kind of the same size and some of the similar questions. So let's start with this idea of everybody has groups. So how do we manage groups? How do we track groups? How do we coach groups and some of those things? I feel like some churches have given up on coaching. I feel like coaching is still a fairly important piece to maintaining healthy groups. Now, when I say that, it usually invokes a lot of guilt in small group pastors, just like it did with me way back when I was a small group pastor. And so let me give you this one statement that's going to offer a little bit of relief. Don't worry about the groups that are already going that you're not coaching, because they figured it out good enough that they can continue without having a whole lot of coaching. So everybody can just breathe a sigh of relief. We don't need to worry about them. They figured it out and they're still going. And then the other part of the good news is that if they figured it out, they would be prime candidates to be coaches for new groups. And so when you launch new groups, or if you have a new round with free market or a new campaign or whatever you're doing, then that's a prime group to go to and say, would you walk alongside a new one for the length of the next series, just to kind of help them out, check in on them, answer the questions, pray for them, and then out of that you can begin to build a coaching structure. I think in addition with that is just the idea of ongoing training. What are you guys doing for training right now? What does that look like at your place?
Shane, you want to go there?
Yeah, sure. So you mean for our leaders or our coaches?
Yeah, for your leaders.
For our leaders. Right now, basically, we kind of have a group leaders kickoff where we go over basically what we desire from our leaders as far as connecting with our groups, how to have successful groups, and when I say successful, as far as attendance and really building relationships with one another to walk through that journey. So we basically just kind of, at the kickoff, we do that. We just kind of go over some points that we want every leader to know. We do a little bit of training on the software and our reporting software, and just kind of rally behind them and let them know what their responsibilities are and what we expect them, as a group leader, and go from there. Okay. We're in the process, communicate with them, you know, on a biweekly basis, basically what's going on this semester, anything new that we need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And my plan this next year is basically kind of sending a little video or, you know, little something like that in their emails of anything that I think that would be interesting to them or, you know, help them grow as a leader. So we've touched base with them basically as a leader kickoff at the beginning of the semester, and in the middle of the semester, we also have what we call North Group Stories, basically talking about what God is doing through groups that semester, but also that gives an opportunity for us to, you know, train them on anything new we feel would be helpful for them. So.
That's good, and I like the idea of video and pushing the video out because it's hard to get people together for a meeting.
Right.
At least maybe my meetings. Because I don't know. No, a small group pastor one time said, how do I get my leaders to come to my meetings? I said, well, you know why they don't come to your meeting? I just met this guy. I said, the reason they don't come to your meetings is because they're boring and irrelevant. What? You think my meetings are boring and irrelevant? I said, well, if they weren't, people would come. But because they don't come, they're boring and irrelevant. And he's like, well, you don't even know me. I said, no, but I know me, and people didn't come to my meetings because they were boring and irrelevant. And, you know, because it's like you go through seminary and you feel like your mission in life is to have meetings. And if people don't, you're sitting in the room and it's like nobody comes to your meeting and you're there in this empty room questioning the call of God in your life because nobody will come to my meetings. And then one day I get this bright idea of, guess what? People don't like meetings. But if I can push training out to them, if I have, you know, if it's a newer group, if I have a coach checking in on them, they can answer their questions. Or if I'm just available, like in the lobby at church, and people come up and say, hey, what do you do? I got this person in my group that talks too much, or I've got people in my group that won't talk, or nobody showed up last night. And you can just kind of have those coaching moments as you go. David, what are some things you guys are doing for training?
Sure. What we do is for when we do a campaign, there's for our hosts, a new host, they come to a host orientation, and that's the same weekend the groups launch, and that's very basic. Just, hey, you know, here's the DVD, here's the study guide, pop the DVD in, you know, just give them some quick how-tos if they've got someone who's going to overtake the group, that sort of thing. Then towards the end of the campaign, towards the end of the 6 weeks, that's when we do our one big blowout training on campus, and that's really the only one during the year that we try to do on campus like that.
Okay. And
so we market it, we advertise it, we have worship. I mean, we try to do everything we can to make it a really, really great event, and so that's for hosts who have decided that maybe they want to go past the 6 weeks and become an ongoing small group leader. So small group leaders and hosts get invited to that training, and that's typically in October. And then after that, it's mainly just them catching up with their coach, or the coach catching up with them, and then my emails that I send monthly. And I'll usually try to make it part, not too much informational, but also like value add. Mm-hmm. Like this month, I put in this great blog post by Alan White on the biblical basis of small groups. You know,
how about that?
It was great.
It's funny, I put that one up on my blog because somebody was reading. I don't know if you guys have seen the chapter that I put out there for my book that someday will be finished. But somebody said, you know, you're telling all these stories and it's building a lot of momentum and it's really great. And then all of a sudden it just turns a corner and you talk about the biblical basis for groups. And I thought, uh-oh. So I actually took it out of the chapter, but I thought, what do I do with it? Oh, I'll put it on my blog. And so there you go, David. You got to use it. So that's the reason. So anyway, very good. Anybody else on the call want to share kind of what you do with training?
Yeah, this is Heather. We kind of do a similar thing. We do a new host orientation up in the front. So in the beginning, before the trimester starts, we do a new host orientation, and we share the vision, the expectations, and then how we're going to provide support and care for them, and just kind of lay, you know, right up front, what do we expect and what are we going to do for you? And then that's our opportunity to really start with the vision. So if the sooner we get them on the vision and value the vision, then the less we have to problem solve later, right, or with retention. So we have orientation, and then about a week before the trimester, we do trimesters, 12-week trimesters, kicks off, we do a kickoff. And that is our main training. So all of our hosts come together, our team leaders and our coaches come together, and we do, that's our train time. And so we incorporate 4 specific key areas, and it's skill, heart, vision, and appreciation. And so every time we meet, we'll make sure that we hit those points. So we want to train them with something. We give them a new skill. Heart, because we need to lead ourselves to be better leaders, right? And then vision is, again, just sharing why we do groups and why we're called to do groups, why we live in community. And then appreciation, because they need to feel valued.
Of course.
And then this trimester, we're starting something new. We haven't done this yet. We're going to do a rally at the end, which is, usually we have our groups do a party once a trimester together, but this time we're doing it together, and it'll be all of our 50 to 60 hosts and then all of their members, and we're going to do some big party together. We haven't done that yet, so we'll see how that goes. That's new.
Well,
and then throughout
cool. You could have them take their party down to Turlock. That's a really fun place.
I hear.
Except it's not.
Except it's not. It's Turlock.
Now, Heather, how long have you been at Crossroads?
So I've been at Crossroads since 2004.
Okay.
As a member. So it just, was married in 04, became a member, followed my husband here, and then on staff since 05.
Okay. So
in different departments, actually. So I've bounced around a little bit, but and served in groups for a while, and then the last year was hired as the director of groups.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure you knew what Manteca meant.
Oh, yeah, I do.
I always used to chuckle when I went by Manteca, California, because Manteca in Spanish is lard.
It is lard, for anyone that doesn't know.
But I lived in a town named Turlock, which is a completely made-up name. So that's that.
Well.
All right, Alan Handiford, welcome.
Thanks.
Hi.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
It's always good to have a backup Alan on these calls. So Alan Handiford and I have been talking off and on for 4 years. So
yeah, it's quite a while actually.
Here we are. And how's everything in Washington State?
Well, it's not raining this morning, so that's a good sign.
That's good. I live in Greenville, South Carolina. You can tell by my colorful accent. But anyway, it is pouring right now. So I think we got your rain.
All right.
So I'm going to send about half my family is coming up to Seattle this weekend because my father-in-law lives in Olympia. So my wife and 2 of my boys are coming up. So you can watch out for them when they're up there, okay?
Okay.
All right. So we were talking about coaching and training. I think you guys have hit on a lot of the key things. I think starting them out with, not a heavy amount of training. I used to train them to death, and if they survived my training, then I let them lead a group. But that doesn't work so much anymore. And I've done things where we'd have one meeting kind of live and in person, and then we would do the rest of the meetings on a conference call, like at 8:30 at night. So the kids were already in bed. I did this with coaches too. And so we'd meet once live and in person, so everybody kind of knew each other, and then we'd be on this conference call, and we'd have, I'd deliver the material, we'd have a discussion, and then that's how we did the training. But then the thing with video, especially pushing it out through an email, has really become, a really effective means of training, in that you're not sending them to the website. It's coming to them. And one of the things we did was we just sent out a survey to a church, to all of their small group leaders, and similar to this webinar, you filled out a survey. What are your top 3 issues? Well, we asked that of their group leaders. So then we compiled a list. We said, here are all of the issues, from childcare to overly talkative people to people won't do their homework to all the small group questions. And so then we interviewed their leaders on camera. Not the ones with the questions, the ones with the answers. And kind of so here's some things that we worked out, and this is how we handled that. And they kept it to 2 minutes, and they pushed those emails out 1 a week for 52 weeks, and gave kind of the training. Now, the part of that is that if you have dozens of groups, or if you have hundreds of groups, they're not all going to have the same question on the same week. So I've got one church that's actually, they're archiving their videos so that you can go onto the church's website and you could do a search by group member won't shut up or something like that. Maybe kinder than that. Now that I live in South Carolina, I have to be kind. But I grew up in Kansas, so that's what you're getting today. But anyway, they would do a search for, whatever, 10 people didn't show up or, whatever. And then they would get the video for whatever addressed that particular topic. And so, kind of a next gen on training, if you will. But I think the coaching piece is still pretty big in all of this. So, and then as far as ongoing, I think it's that thing of offering things, like we were talking, David, about, your first year or Van Dyke's first year, we pushed hard. We did 3 series, did them back to back, didn't let anybody come up for air. And you could do that kind of in your first year, and then you get everybody on board, and then, then you back off a little bit and offer, you kind of go maybe with what Saddleback does, do 1 a year and do it in the fall or do it in the new year, which would be a stronger season. I've got some churches that are launching big series at Easter, and the positive reason for doing that is Easter is the Sunday that everybody shows up for church. So you have kind of a captive audience. We did this with Gene Apple a few years ago at Eastside Christian in Anaheim, and he started 460 groups off of his Easter.
Wow, that's awesome.
Of course, the downside of launching groups off of Easter, and maybe you've seen this post somewhere, my 3 reasons I don't like launching groups off of Easter are called June, July, and August. And those are a little tough to overcome. But, we even, the beginning of May, and this is a good old Turlock, Heather, beginning of May, we would announce to them, oh, by the way, if you enjoy meeting together, we're going to offer another series like this, and it's going to start the 2nd Sunday in October. And then I just held my breath, and I turned blue. I passed out. And then we got to the 2nd Sunday in October, and lo and behold, 80% of the groups that started after Easter were right there ready to go in October. And I would not have believed that, except that I experienced it myself. But I think that once you've got groups established and you're going, you can add to that every year, but I would back off and maybe do at least 1 campaign a year, 1 series a year, or 2 at the most. But I wouldn't go, and then make suggestions for them, or here's Right Now Media, or I don't know if you guys have seen smallgroup.com that Lifeway's come out with. It's not smallgroups.com. That's Christianity Today. This is smallgroupsingular.com. And it's a great place where they have lessons that are already written. They're adding in some video of like J.D. Greer, some gal nobody's ever heard of called Beth Moore, and people like that. But anyway, it's a subscription thing similar to Right Now Media. And neither of them are paying me for saying, giving those plugs, but they should is the thing. So anyway, I think just offering, again, continual stuff, and then dealing with, situations, problems that come up in groups, and, helping the leader out. We asked Carl George years ago, what are the signs of a healthy group? And he said, let me go the other way. He said, I'll tell you the 2 things that are sure to end a group that create unhealth. He said, one is the absence of a coaching structure. Which we've all decided not to feel guilty about that. We're working on it. But the absence of a coaching structure. And then the second thing he said is the presence of a narcissistic personality or neurotic personality in the group. And he said sometimes it requires the coach, it requires an experienced leader to help a new leader realize this person that's dominating the discussion, this person that's only talking about themselves, this person that's dragging everybody else down with their problems is not a normal situation. And you need some intervention, you need some help to handle that, or else your group's going to fall apart. So those were kind of the big ones, is kind of, in order to keep the group healthy, you have to kind of avoid the unhealth aspect of all of that. So I have gone all over the world with our questions. I think the only thing I didn't cover was tracking. What are you guys using to track your groups?
We use church teams, and the Growth Finder emails from church teams.
Yeah.
We use the same.
You do? Well, this is good news. I love church teams.
Hey.
We use CCB.
You use what?
CCB.
Okay. How is that working for you?
Well, it seems to be working pretty well. The main challenge always is making sure that the group leaders respond, do their attendance, and return them. It's a pretty simple system. I mean, it's on their smartphones, it's on their computers. They get right now, I believe the system's set up where there's 3 notices that they get. So they're either they totally hate the system because they're asked several times, please give your attendance.
Yeah.
And there's also a notice that comes an hour before, and then several come afterwards. But it does work. It does seem to work well. It's a little cumbersome because of the firewalls and its security factors.
Oh, okay.
Because there's certain things that they can add to. An older system we used, you could designate someone to be a head counter. This one, because of security, it's got to be on that group leader.
Oh,
because you've got codes and their numbers or social security codes or whatever it is coming into it, and people just don't want to produce that because it's individually driven.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with it. If anybody from CCB was listening, that was Alan Handiford and not Alan White, just for the record. But I am a big fan of church teams. I like that it pushes out that email every week after the meeting. They click a link, they go right in, they check off. But one of the things I have found, and it's not so much a database thing, is what you were pointing out, Alan, was it's a user thing. And so what I found is that, people that are highly relational, people that are really great at gathering a group and shepherding that group and caring for people are not always so great at filling out reports. And because they got into it for the people part, not for the, report taking part. And so what I trust sometimes is that, that very relational person that's leading the group is married to someone that's a little more task oriented, that can maybe fill out the report instead of them. So maybe we're sending the email, to the wrong person and should send it to the spouse because, opposites attract, or it could be even another member of the group that could be designated as the report taker. And so, reporting to me is, numbers are numbers. And I'm kind of with Hybels, you count your money, so why wouldn't you count your people? So I agree with that. Plus if you don't have good numbers and you're the small group pastor, you get fired. I don't think that's true. But anyway, my main concern with tracking things is if a group has a dramatic decline. They've been cruising along for several weeks. They've got 10, 12 people. And then all of a sudden they've got like 4 people and it stays at 4. So it's like, what happened to those 6 or 8 people? What's going on with the group? Maybe they had a neurotic personality, maybe, and the leader, of course, is going to think I must be a terrible leader because that's what everybody thinks. If people don't show up, I'm a terrible leader, they don't want to come back. And then you won't pick up the phone to call because you're afraid that they're going to say, well, the reason we're not coming back is because you're a terrible leader. Nobody's going to say that. That's probably because their kid was sick or whatever. But, a group that's having a dramatic decline, they need some kind of an intervention, or not like we're going to sit them down and say, you are a terrible leader, but they need somebody to look in on them. The other thing I look at are groups that dramatically increase. So a group was 12 and now they're 25. So what's going on there? Because that's a crisis of a different kind. And rather than having 25 people packing into a living room, the question really goes to, are they subgrouping and how well are they caring for people? And if they're, continuing to lose people, then maybe we need to sit down and have an unpleasant conversation about maybe some of your group should go meet in another house. And then they'll say, like we talked about earlier, well, we're in America. We heard that works really great in Korea, but we don't want to do that. And so then I would say, well, you're going to have to buy a bigger house. That's the only other option because you're not moving it to the church. We're not going to allow that. So that's that. Well, we're about halfway through. So now we're going to have a little word from our sponsor, if you will. We already covered some of those questions. Okay, now a word from our sponsor. And our sponsor would be Alan White Consulting, which is me. So just pardon me for a little bit. So I've been in ministry for 25 years. I know I look incredibly young. I have a 2-year-old, but I've been in ministry for 25 years. Most of the last 12 years, I've worked with Brett Eastman at Life Together Ministries, and have coached some of the largest churches in the country. I mean, it's crazy to think about. I've coached churches as small as 40 people and as large as 40,000, and I'll let you guess which one that might be. I've coached hundreds of churches, and this is not bragging. This is just kind of like, I can't believe this is my life. In the last 4 years, we've helped churches launch over 13,000 small groups, and in this year, January till now, we've launched right at about 4,000 groups. In fact, there are 2 churches that I'm working with pretty closely that in the last month have launched. One recruited 500 leaders. The other one is right at 350. So just those 2 churches is 850. The crazy thing is, prior to this fall launch, I was working with 12 churches at the beginning of the year, and those 12 churches had launched just under 3,000 groups in 12 churches, and they weren't all like megas. So I help churches recruit leaders and launch groups, develop systems and structures to support groups, produce their own video curriculum, retain groups for the long haul, and my little tagline is take the guesswork out of small groups. So how do I do that? Up to this point, churches would pay $2,000 to $5,000 per month for my services, which is a ridiculous amount of money. So I don't do that anymore, because what I decided was, when I was with Life Together, the goal was to work with churches that were 2,000 and larger for the most part. And so, being the genius that I am, what I discovered was there are far more churches that are under 2,000 than there are churches over 2,000. See how smart I am? And so I'm working with those. So I offer courses that start at $57. I'm doing coaching cohorts, which have like 5 pastors on each one. Those run about $1,200 a year. I'm doing advanced coaching with guys that have been around and they know all the basics and they want to get on to the other stuff. And we're still trying to figure out what that's going to be and how much. And then I do some individual coaching with churches, and it varies according to the size of the church and how much they need, how many times I need to be there, and all of that. So if you're interested in any of that, you can go on to alanwhite.org/consulting and find out all about that. Okay, so now we are going to return to our regular programming. And I can't get that off my screen, so I don't know what the deal is. I'm not an expert in PowerPoint, and I had all of your faces on here, and now I've lost you. Oh, here you are. Now you're back. Okay, so let's move on to another slide that's less intimidating. Okay, so let's go back and look at some of the questions that we haven't covered yet. And you guys that have been in this a while can probably help me with some of these. So some questions related to group leaders and recruiting group leaders. And I know that we've come at this from a lot of different angles, but what are some things that you guys have tried that have been successful in recruiting group leaders?
This year we kind of went, I want to say a little bit more casual.
Okay.
We did a start a group campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And basically said, you know, if you love God, if you love people, you follow Jesus, and you have 2 or 3 friends, you got a group. And so that's something that a little bit different that we did this year. We really just kind of pushed the free market system, saying that if you want to start a new group, let's just go ahead and do it. You don't need any special skills. I think a lot of people are intimidated about saying that they're a group leader.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted to really just kind of put it out there that you don't need any special skills. You know, anyone can do it. So.
Yeah.
And we, our biggest thing is we just went to the whiteboard and threw names on a board of, about 60 to 70 people that we felt like we had a connection with, that, we would see as good group leaders. And then we just took turns. I mean, we split it up and called and met with those people and asked them personally if they would like to start a group and to pray about it. So,
no,
so we got that.
Yeah, no, that's great, because some people don't see themselves as being a leader. They don't see themselves as being a teacher. And sometimes it is that reaching out, tapping them on the shoulder and saying, you may not see this, but I see this in you. I see how you work with people. I see, in fact, I had a coach years ago that thought he was dumb because he didn't graduate from high school. So he just thought, well, everybody thinks I'm dumb because I didn't graduate from high school. And he He operated a construction crane, drove the crane around, set it up, in the Bay Area, which if you're driving a car in the San Francisco Bay Area, it shows that you're not dumb. Or maybe you are, but you have to be smart to maneuver that. So he's driving this crane around. And so he got into multi-level marketing, which I have my own feelings about that, so we won't go there. But I saw how he acted relationally with people and how well he maintained relationships and the number of relationships that he managed at a time. And I said, Doug, would you be interested in helping me with some of these new groups because they need help? I said, my only request is, could you keep the product out of it? And he did. He agreed to it. And I got to the end of my time there, and this was out in Turlock. And everybody wants to go visit Turlock now. Heather, I mentioned it so many times. Don't, because you'll be disappointed, I guarantee you. But anyway, so when I was ending my time in Turlock, Doug came to me and he said, Pastor Allen, thank you for showing me that I was the leader I never knew that I was. And there's a lot of that. And of course, we all know if people are open to allowing God to use them, God will use them and incredible things will happen, beyond all we could ask or imagine. And it's just a matter of, taking that risk. What are some other ways that you guys have used to recruit leaders?
Well, we use We use the host model, and that does really, really well. I mean, recruiting leaders usually is not our issue. So we'll do when it comes around, we do two produced church-wide series a year, one in September and one in January, and we'll usually do a video along with that, and it's just pretty similar message. We have a host up there who says, or it's now an ongoing small group leader says, hey, I was scared to host, but God called me to do it. I tried it, and lo and behold, now I have a small group. We're like a family. It's been great. We just kind of play that over and over again with different people, and then Pastor Matthew gives a really strong push towards it, and we're normally able to get the host that we need.
Yeah, and you guys have done a tremendous job with that. And here's the thing that I've seen is that other than Jesus Christ, the reason people attend your church is because of your senior pastor, especially if they're not connected to each other. If they're unconnected, the reason they come is because of your senior pastor. They like your pastor's personality, they like his style, they like his humor. Now, don't say this to your worship pastor because it'll break his heart. But they're there because of your pastor. So when your pastor says, if you've created curriculum, your pastor says, we're going to do this series with small group curriculum based on my teaching. Well, now you're just giving them more of what they want already. And then your pastor says, I want everybody in this thing. I want you all to get together with your friends and do this study. Then they're going to follow his direction. Now, as far as the training and the coaching and all of that hard work of getting them going and helping them work through problems, that falls on, as we say here in South Carolina, that falls on all y'all on this call. That's your job. But if your senior pastor can get out there and say the word. So, David, just to tell one story on your senior pastor, because he is a friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time. We were on a conference call, and we were in the call. We were discussing the curriculum that we would be shooting with their team to launch a January series. This is September of 2011. And so we're going to launch this curriculum in January. By the end of the call, the conversation had turned to we were going to come out the following Monday and shoot a curriculum that the church was going to launch in 30 days.
Sounds about right.
And it's exactly right. So we spent a whole day in this beautiful home shooting the curriculum. We shot a host segment. We shot leader training. We shot testimonies. We shot the pastor's teaching. We shot some promo video stuff. And then the next morning in his office, he says, so we've created these materials. How are we going to recruit leaders, and how are we going to connect people into groups? And later in the day, I won't mention any names, but one of the discipleship pastor came to me and said, I've been trying to get my pastor interested in small groups for 2 years, and you just did it. And I
Right.
just smiled at him. I said, well, I'm Alan White. No, and that's not the reason. The reason was the pastor had some skin in the game. The
Yeah.
pastor was on the video. So what pastor, rather than saying, let's work hard, prepare a message, then I preach it on a weekend, and then I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it in a file and stick it in a drawer, and probably not see it again for a number of years. No pastor wants to do that. But to say we could take your message and we could craft it so that we could use it during the week, and people could revisit the topic and talk about how they're going to apply it to their life, well, that's very appealing to a pastor. And then the pastor says, well, how are we going to get all these leaders? How are we going to connect them into groups? And then we say, well, that pastor, that's when we need your help. We need you to invite people to take a step out. So I don't think Matthew would be offended that I told that story, because it's a good story. And maybe not the 2-year part, because, I'll just say that you were lying. It's also how we play here in South Carolina. But anyway, except it's recorded, so I'm busted. I'm busted. So anyway, what are some of the rest of you? What are some ways that you've seen successful in recruiting leaders?
Well, for a couple of years, we used to take the husband and the wife of the group leader to Gig Harbor for a weekend. And we would put them up overnight, feed them, and then try to indoctrinate and convince them that they needed to raise up apprentices in their groups. And also on those trips, if they had an apprentice couple, because we always wanted to pull the wife into the picture, we'd bring the wife and the apprentice to Gig Harbor, and there we would try to show them that this is what we're talking about, and we'd like for you to consider birthing a new group. So we did that, and when we look back over it, we haven't done that in a few years. Truth is, the time that they got from our location to Gig Harbor, which is probably a very short period of time if you could fly there, but the traffic was so hard on Friday night and to make it there Friday. The time you got couples there, put them up, give them good accommodation, they had to take care of child care, so it became too big a production. Although it was occasionally, I think, a good idea, but it just ended up a big investment of time, energy. We put together brochures, training. They were drinking from a fire hose of information because we were so limited in time.
Yeah.
But we did get some response that I suppose you could sit back and say it created a high visibility and a lot of chatter. So it raised that, it made it more visible and conscious. And the consciousness of the church was better when we did that.
Yeah.
But it does seem to come, I think like Shannon said, it comes from finding a person, convincing them, build a relationship with them, and saying you can do this. But a big key for us here, the big struggle is finding curriculum that you can hand off to a new leader. It is not just curriculum, it's not just biblical issue. My experience has been it is also understanding its personality wrap and group dynamic wrap, which becomes a major factor.
Yeah, and there are a lot of things. Some of it you just kind of have to get it started and clean up the mess, but then also choosing the right topic. I've had churches, it'd say, so what's your series going to be, for the next round? And I've had everything from, we're going to do a series on fasting. And I'm like, oh, we're going to launch groups off of fasting? It's like, well, the snacks are going to be really easy. But, we're going to do a series on tithing. And it's like, oh, wow. Can we wait and launch groups on the next one? Or, we're going to do a series on evangelism. Now, I think all of these things are very important. Don't get me wrong in that. But they're not like the greatest series to launch a bunch of groups with. You have to have the right topic. It usually tends to be more felt needs. Then you run the danger of some of your more experienced leaders saying that it's, the curriculum's watered down and it's not what they expected, not what they're used to. And sometimes you let a few of those just kind of go off and say, well, you guys could do this series on fasting, tithing, or evangelism, and the rest of us are going to do this series that's a broader topic. I had one pastor years ago. I said, what's your series going to be in January, Frank? He says, I think I'm going to do a series about the biblical principles of dying and of physically dying. I said, you're killing me, Frank. But anyway, I need a little drummer in there. So yeah, there are a lot of different ways of recruiting leaders. And I think too, every church needs to do something that's in a place where they're comfortable. I had one church I was working with a couple years ago, and they said, well, all of the people that we recruit to host a group, they need to be a member. And I thought, oh, Lord, we are dead in the water. I said, well, how many members do you have? They said, well, we have 7,000 members. I said, I think I can work with that. All right. So connecting people into groups and promoting groups. The promoting part, I think, too, if you get your senior pastor involved, senior pastors on the curriculum, your senior pastor is going to want to promote the curriculum. They certainly don't want the curriculum to fail. I went to all this trouble and I put my teaching on the curriculum and we got 5 groups. That's not a story that any pastor wants to tell. So they're going to be motivated to promote the curriculum. Now, the connecting people into groups thing is there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I've done the thing where, people would fill out a little sign-up card, and then I would look at the map and say, okay, this group is near their house, so I'm going to place them in that group. And then what typically would happen is the leader wouldn't call the person that I placed in their group. The person that filled out the card wouldn't show up to the group even if they were called, or the person got into the group and they did the 6-week series, and at the end of the series, the group just fell apart. So I thought there's got to be a better way. So here's kind of my rule of thumb of how to get connected into a group. So we'll start with my thumb. Number 1, the easiest way to get into a group is to start a group. Because if you start the group, you're in. Even if a group is only, 2 or 3 people, that's fine. As long as the 2 or 3 people are not me, myself, and I. So the best way to get into a group is to start a group. Second best way to get into a group is personal invitation. So you think about, who are people in my life that would enjoy or benefit from a study? So friends, family, coworkers, neighbors, and again, if it's not, tithing or fasting, what's a topic that they would be interested in, and then invite them. So personal invitation. And then the third way that I think is best to get into a group is personal introduction. And so if you have a church that has grown dramatically, I was talking to a church yesterday that 5 years ago they were 500, today they are 4,000, which is just, it's phenomenal. I'm like, what are you doing differently? And they're like, it's just a God thing. And the more they explained it, I thought, wow, it's a God thing. So churches that have grown dramatically, churches that have kind of a high churn. So whether a church is near a military base or they're in a college town, I've got one church I've worked with that's 4,000 on the weekend. I see heads shaking from Oklahoma City, heads nodding. One church that's near Fort Bragg, and there are 4,000 adults. And they've been 4,000 adults for a long time, but they overturn 1,000 adults a year because people get deployed and people get reassigned, and then a new group. So they've had to grow by 1,000 a year just to maintain 4,000. They're like, if people had stayed in town, we would be like a church of 20,000 people right now. But I told them that, I said, look at it this way. You're sending missionaries all over the world, which, they totally get that. They totally believe in that. But I think, connecting people, if you have a high turnover like that, and maybe they say, well, I'm new here. I just moved to town. I just got placed here, just started college here or whatever. Then you create an environment where people can meet the people that are leading groups or hosting groups, and then they can sign up to be in a specific group. Now, there may be some recollection of, didn't you used to work at such and such a place because I used to go in there all the time, or, maybe they went to high school together. It all depends. But at a minimum, what you get is within about 60 seconds, you get the sense of, is this a person I want to hang out with for the next 6 weeks or not? And so you have some affinity. The host knows who's coming to their house. The member knows whose house they're coming to. And then beyond that, lists of groups and websites and sign-up cards. I blogged about my hatred of sign-up cards. If you use them, God bless you. It's a lot of work. I had one church, I was trying to show them the light on this connection event, and they said, well, I have a full-time person, and their responsibility is connecting people into groups. And so we're going to, did somebody say what? Yeah, so that was their full-time job, was connecting people into groups. So if we didn't do sign-up cards, the person didn't have a job. So I'm like, well, okay, if you create this environment and people meet each other and sign up to be in a group, you create better groups, and then maybe the person doesn't have a job anymore, but then you've saved $40,000, $50,000 a year in your budget. So, but they liked them too much. They didn't want to can them. So that's kind of my take on connecting people into groups. Is try to keep it, and it's an overused word, but try to form groups organically. And I've seen groups that have been families. I've seen groups that are coworkers. I've seen groups that have trended to be a little bit smaller. So a lot of it just kind of depends. Let's see what.
Alan,
Go ahead.
Have you any input or information on creating group curriculum that can be used for a family setting where actually you've got adults and their children together in a group?
Yeah, I don't know of anybody that specifically has designed that. I know when Saddleback did the first 40 Days of Purpose, they had a student edition and a children's edition. But I haven't seen so much of using it in the family setting. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I think the challenge is that you have learning that happens at so many different levels that you're probably going to tend to speak to the lowest level of learning, which would be whoever the youngest child is in the room. And that may not necessarily be where you want to go with that.
Yeah, my experience with it has not been successful, and what I have observed of it, in my opinion, has not worked for the adults.
Yeah.
For sure, it doesn't make an opportunity, but the child care issue is such a challenge that I was thinking, well, maybe for those that maybe especially can't figure a way around that, maybe that might be an alternative.
Yeah, and it is a tricky one. And, short of either only being in a group before you have children or after your children are grown and gone, it's complex. And
what about a mid-sized group spin-off? In our neighboring city here, Vancouver, British Columbia,
mm-hmm.
we've done quite a bit of success with mid-sized groups of, say, 50 or so, and then able to spin groups and group leaders off those.
Yeah, the only thing I would like to see what they're doing, because my only hesitation is that it's easy for a group to meet on campus because the room is prepared, the child care is available, and all of that. I've had a struggle with taking groups that met on campus and then getting all or a portion of that group then to meet off campus. It was hard to make that move. And, being in the South, and I'll be careful here, but being in the South, there's a sense of entitlement of, we contributed the money to pay for the building, so why can't we use the building? And, of course, I had a very good reason, and that is the building was completely full 6 nights of the week and closed on Saturday. So I didn't have a place to put their group. And so I said, these groups are going to have to start off campus. But then the groups that met on campus, just prior to my arriving, they had ended a practice where they were paying for all of the group's child care to the tune of $250,000 a year.
Well, several churches on the West Coast have total child care.
Yeah.
Free child care, and they do it online, and you can register for your child. You can choose your own child care worker or babysitter, and then you submit your your requests for the fee up to $5 an hour, if so much per kid, up to 3 kids, and then you get reimbursed for it. Now, some of those claim people eventually don't actually ding you for the money, but that's the way they work around it. But that's I've seen the systems, and they're very complex. The ones in Vancouver that are mid-size, when I've talked to them up there, amazingly, those groups run 50 people in a home, which also, when I asked their average age is like 25, no children. Totally different picture there.
Well, and I think part of it too is that because they're in Canada, they have to have that many bodies in the room just to stay warm. So I better be careful. My next call is with the pastor up in Toronto. But anyway, yeah, no, it's funny. Well, we're kind of coming to the end of our time. What questions or issues haven't been addressed that you might be interested in hitting in the last couple minutes here?
I think for me, that one of the biggest questions, this is Heather, is moving groups and hosts from just a social group to a discipleship group that's going to multiply. And obviously I know that deals with upfront training and things like that, but what do you guys do to move those leaders, those hosts or those leaders from just a social group to a discipleship group, that they're multiplying themselves?
Yeah, I think that, it's a challenge if they started in a different place to convert them over to something else. It's usually better to start them with where you intend them to be, but I know there may have been things that you inherited that it's like, how do you do this? And so to me, it's like, you can get away with a little bit by saying, let's do an experiment, or let's try a pilot of something, or would you be open for 6 weeks, not the rest of your life, to doing this and offering them a curriculum, offering them something that's going to help them, follow through. But hopefully with the desire that it's going to catch on, that they're going to enjoy doing that, and they're going to stick with it over time. That's kind of my take on it. I went into a church in Texas one time. They paid me a consulting fee just to come in and run a meeting that they didn't want to run, and which was interesting. I didn't know what I was getting into. I thought they were just going to pick my brain but anyway, so I go in and they said, well, here's the situation. We have all of these fellowship groups that we've developed over time, and now we want to launch small groups that are based on the message, but we want to launch the small groups without, ticking off all these people that are heavily invested in the fellowship groups, because they've been doing these for years and years and years, and they're kind of the, foundational members of our church, which is code for if they leave, our giving is going to go way down and we'll lose our jobs. And so I stood up in the meeting and I said, well, folks, I've been talking with your pastors today, and I said, let me tell you how smart your pastors are. They see a lot of people in the church that, are new to Christ. They don't know as much about their faith, and they want to start some new groups for those folks to help disciple them and grow them. But here's how smart your pastors are. They're going to allow you to continue doing exactly what you're doing as long as you want to. Now, you're welcome to look at this Bible study, but you're welcome to continue as you are. And, I think just, your pastors came up with that and they're so smart. I think you just ought to give them a hand right now. And there were a few that were a little kind of like, what's this change? And, all that stuff. But, the motto is shoot the consultant. So I was there to take the bullets, and I collected my check and flew home. And it all went well. I don't know what they were afraid of, except that it was a well-established church with a legacy ministry, and they just didn't want to upset the apple cart, but they knew they needed to introduce something new. So I think when you're trying to get somebody to, convert over to a different format for their group, I would say, let's go gently, see if we can get them to try something, and hopefully they'll like it. I am a strong advocate against shutting things down for the sake of new things, because I think people get worn out by that. But it is a tough one. So maybe just kind of introduce a little bit at a time, run an experiment or a pilot trial run, whatever you want to call it, and see how it goes. Does that help at all?
Yes, that does, yeah.
Yeah, because, you can have an experiment. If it's a failed experiment, they'll say, well, why aren't you doing that anymore? What was an experiment? It didn't work as well as we thought, so we're going to try something else. So that works. So, all right, maybe time for one last question, and then I gotta get into a meeting. So, who's got it? Doris, are you with us? We haven't heard from you today. Maybe muted. All right. Anything else, guys?
Do you use, you may have already said this, Alan, and I think you have before, but do you find that you introduce birth new groups, start new groups, whatever, and on a 6-week run, then trying to push all through the year?
Yeah, I've done this 6 weeks, multiple times. Usually one in the fall, one in the new year, one after Easter. If you're just starting out, and then if you've been at it for a while, like I said before, maybe you just cut back to one a year. But the 6 weeks we got from Lyman Coleman, because Lyman said that 6 weeks was short enough for a man to commit and long enough for a man to sense community. And that's not to offend the ladies, except that you can sense community in like 6 minutes and not 6 weeks. Is that true? I don't know. Shannon's smiling, so I'm not in too much trouble. Heather might have hung up. But anyway, so the idea is to get the guys into it. They're going to be a little bit reluctant, and then 6 weeks is long enough, but it's not like the rest of their life. So I think offering the short. Now, the goal of that is, a lot of the success is offering them 6 weeks. A lot of the failure is creating a bunch of energy, getting a bunch of people connected for 6 weeks, and then not offering them the next step. And then they don't know where to go. And especially, if you launch one in the fall and it's 6 weeks long, and then you have Thanksgiving, and then you have Christmas, and then you have New Year's, and now you've lost momentum. And so this may be the most important thing I've said all day, is that if in the middle of the 6 weeks, you say, oh, by the way, if you're interested in meeting together, if you like meeting together, we're going to do another series, and it's going to start the middle of January. And if you get the group to make a decision before the first 6-week series is over, then you have a good chance that group is going to continue. If you wait to the end and you try to get them back together, that's much harder. And then they say, well, what do we do during the holidays? And you say, well, you could have a party, you could serve together, you could, take a break or whatever, but then the series is going to start in the middle of January, and they'll be right there ready to go. And you usually don't say, go on to Right Now Media and look at 100 different choices, and then they pick Francis Chan, and then they watch Francis Chan, and even though he's wonderful, they say, I don't know if I'm a Christian or not, according to what Francis Chan just said. And I love Francis Chan. Don't sing Francis Chan on me. I couldn't handle it. But anyway, you want to give them one choice, because most groups don't have much of an opinion. But if you can get them to do 2 6-week series, then they're pretty much good to go as a group from that point forward. And you don't have to do a lot to prompt them or to prod them, except to continue to offer them a path of either church-wide series or other curriculum recommendations. And then that's where the coaching and the training piece comes in, to help them to continue on from there. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you a little bit. But if you're interested in anything from our sponsor there, feel free to look at the webpage, or you can just email me. You guys have my email address, and we can talk about maybe a way it can help your church. But appreciate you being on here, and we've had a good conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.